You're listening to Ask the Advocate, a podcast series that features advocates for domestic violence, sexual violence, and all other survivors of abuse and serious crime. I'm your host, Bille Jo Wyatt, and for the past 3 decades, I've worked in the victim services industry, serving as the executive director for a Pennsylvania-based nonprofit named CAPSI, which stands for Citizens Against Physical, Sexual, and Emotional Abuse. I invite you to join me as I sit down with my guests each episode to discuss critical victim service resources and to help raise awareness for the most pressing challenges facing survivors and the nonprofit agencies that serve them. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ask the Advocate. This is episode 7, and today with me, my special guest is Angela Chu. Angela and I have known each other for many years. Angela is a licensed clinical social worker, and she's worked for the Dickinson Center for many, many years, and most recently program director of the Dickinson Restoration Center. Angela, today our topic is domestic violence and its impact on children. I know you and I have worked together for many, many years. I want to turn it over to you so that you can tell folks exactly what you do and your dedication to working with children and families.
Thanks, Bille Jo. It's great being here with you today about this very, very important topic. As Bille Jo has said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been working in the field of mental health since I got my master's in 1995. Predominantly, most of my career, I've specialized in working with children and adolescents. And in that period, I have been exposed to a number of different things, but one of my specialties was working with individuals who have been exposed to trauma and traumatic events. I have gravitated into doing things with adults as well. And honestly, my new program that I've been operating will kind of be able to tell you exactly how some of these things impact in the long term, as the individuals that I serve now have been heavily impacted by trauma and abuse and issues like that. I'm currently on my last phase of my dissertation for my doctorate. So, next time if I have to be here with Bille Jo, it might be Dr. Chu. And I've been with Dickinson Center for about going on just recently, it was 12 years, and have been an outpatient therapist for a long time, was the clinical director of our outpatient programs, and now the director of this. I've worked in group foster homes in the past. I've worked in alternative schools for children that had behavior problems. I have been a case manager. I've worked inpatient, done a little bit of everything as social workers are trained to do. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's wonderful. And Angela, today, what we're really going to concentrate on is we'd like to talk about proven short-term and long-term impacts about children witnessing domestic violence and sexual violence. I think this is a topic that really needs to be brought to the forefront, because I know you and I both, what we've done for many years in our own jobs, kids get lost in the shuffle. And it's very difficult many times when they are experiencing the effects of domestic violence and sexual violence. Just people don't realize how it affects their development and how it affects their future, both physically, emotionally, mentally, socialization skills, things like that. And that's why I'm so excited to have you here today, because you will offer everyone a different insight. And by the end of our podcast, I think that we're going to be able to really give folks some good information to take away so that they're going to better understand what they can do to get more information and also help children.
That's fantastic.
So let's get started with, how prevalent do you believe that the effects of violence on a child witnessing it, domestic violence, for instance, or any type of abuse or violence, how prevalent is that? Do you see it a lot in your line of work?
Yes, we do. And I think that the numbers that, even when you look up statistics and things like that, those numbers are downplayed because not everything gets reported or gets recognized. So you always know that it's higher than whatever number there is. The last numbers that I've seen, about 15 million children have experienced at least one episode or witnessed an episode of violence. Now you compile that with society's level of the violence. So fears of school shootings, individuals who have been exposed to just the violence that is easily portrayed on television and social media and video games. Those things just increase that exposure. And so it equates to about like 1 in 3 kids who witness abuse are also abused themselves. But not all children that witness that violence and abuse are necessarily the direct victims of abuse, meaning that they were physically abused, which is sometimes confusing to individuals. They don't think their children are impacted because of that, and they really are.
Absolutely. My work through CAPSI, what I experience a lot is the fact it's very difficult for our counselor advocates to many times explain to and help other professionals understand that even though children are not directly being hurt, by witnessing and experiencing that, what their a parent is experiencing or their guardian, how that's going to affect them. And I know many times I've had our staff trained in like signs and symptoms, but not only that, like the ACEs study. Because I think the ACEs study, and you can talk more about that than I ever could, that really is a good indicator of what happens when children are exposed to abuse and neglect for extended periods of time. If you want to talk a little bit about that and what happens to us as we grow and mature.
Sure. So the ACEs study was a study that was done back in the 90s by Kaiser Permanente, and basically identified 10 types of adverse childhood experiences that then impact an individual after the age of 18 in the sense of the long term. And so most individuals have experienced at least one of these, and it can include anywhere from actual like sexual abuse, physical abuse, but it also includes things like neglect, not having the needed items or attention, feeling emotionally distant, witnessing domestic violence, having a parent that's been under the use, access of substances and things like that, as well as mental health disorders. And so all those things are factored into domestic violence events. And, the study basically says that there are huge potential risks for healthcare, not just mental health and emotional health, but also the physical health, even to the point of expected life expectancy. It affects, them in such degree that even having the more adverse childhood, those more ACEs you have, the more risk you have. The risk factors for someone to become a substance abuser who has 4 or more ACEs is somewhere in like the 1,200% risk factor, like increased risk. And so even with things like when you just narrow in on things like domestic violence, that's one of the ACEs. But along with domestic violence, often those incidents include somebody who's abusing substances, someone who's impoverished, someone who's under stress or have mental health problems. And so then that adds to those ACEs right there. And then sometimes somebody gets incarcerated in those situations, also another ACEs issue. So it has a huge ripple effect, all of these things. And it's important that that people become aware of that, and that children are way smarter than we ever give them credit for. They are not jaded in their perceptions. So they can sense. So even if you think that a child has not seen it or even heard it, they know when their parent or their caregiver that there's something off with them. They sense it because that's what they're used to. They're used to using their sensory experiences at that point, because those are the first things we use. And those are hugely impacted in trauma and the effects of trauma, to the point where there have been studies that show that even children who are in the womb still, if they are exposed to aggressive, loud talking, because we have to remember that those individuals can hear in the womb, and they recognize it. They also sense the mother's stress levels. They are also able, not to mention if there's actual physical abuse that occurs while the woman's pregnant and what the physical aspects of that occur. And that is all while the most critical early parts of the brain are developing in the womb. And the earlier that exposure is, the more significant the effect is on the individual. They don't have the cognitive skills in those earlier ages to figure out and make sense of it, if there is a way to make sense of any of that, or at least figure out how to cope with it. Children, some people like to say children are resilient. And Dr. Bruce Perry, who's a huge guru of developmental trauma, has noted that it's not so much that they're resilient, it's that they're malleable, which means they can be molded and directed and formed if they have good support systems, even through the most difficult challenges, if they have some things in place that can help guide them through that event or that issue. When they don't have that, then what they're being formed to is what they're witnessing, what they're experiencing. And so that puts them in a state of distress and in constant crisis stress. Our brains aren't meant to do that whatsoever.
You bring that up, and I've experienced and have worked with, and I know you have also, I have worked with many women at CAPC, and I'm sure this goes across the United States and all over the world, where I have women where domestic violence and sexual violence increased 200% or more when that woman found out she was pregnant. And that is one of the signs and symptoms of an increase in domestic violence, is when that woman becomes pregnant. There's jealousy there with that abuser. There's not all the focus is on that person any longer. And I unfortunately did have a woman that did lose a pregnancy. She had a baby die at almost 9 months old because of the fact that she was beaten so badly. And people think that doesn't happen. It happens, unfortunately, every day. And I was thinking, too, while you were talking, all the children I've seen here and, suffering the effects of domestic violence. And we have parents coming into our shelter seeking safety. And so many of those kids, it's almost like we can tell you right now what's going to happen. The level of anxiety, the restlessness, first of all, not even being able to sleep because you're in a strange atmosphere. But then the longer they're here, they can't concentrate. School becomes just horrendous for them to concentrate and do anything. And then you also find where children become the caretakers in many cases. And I'm sure that I'm preaching to the choir there because you've seen it all. And not wanting to leave that parent, the separation anxiety is really bad many times. So Angela, even going back to that ACEs study, I do want everyone to understand that you can go online and check that out. There's really good information about the ACEs study, and I think you can even access the questionnaire.
You absolutely can. Yeah. If you just Google like adverse childhood experiences or ACEs study, you will find all kinds of material that connects to it and information about it.
I think too, there was something else on that, and correct me if I'm wrong because you're so well versed in this, about the fact of higher rates of cancer and other things. As far as once you score above 4 or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of health adversities that go along with it. So there's increased risk of cancer. Basically, any kind of that kind of level, living your life in that level of stress suppresses your immune system, which means your body can't fight things that it might have not been able to fight or to overcome. Obesity huge risk of obesity, which then of course just ripples out to, other problems, cardiac problems. They've even linked things as far as asthma, which I suspect, and things like that are more because of the risky behaviors that sometimes accompany that level, that trauma response behavior. And so many things. Kids will complain, and they'll have what we used to call somatic complaints that a lot of people will think children are faking, because there isn't a medical cause to their stomach aches, their headaches. They're, not feeling right. They're feeling lightheaded, those kinds of things. Those are all things that are symptoms of anxiety. Especially if a child has not been trained or doesn't recognize their worries or fears. And so they just know they don't feel right. It can also be that need to not leave that parent alone for fear that something terrible is going to happen to them. And so you see those risks, which of course, all those things snowball into then a lower life expectancy and people that have that history not living. Now, does that mean every person that's had those experiences end up with those things? Of course not. It all depends on intervention, support systems, protective factors is the word that we like to use.
Right.
Even having just one positive adult in their life that they feel safe with, which in many cases is their teacher. In many cases. And of course, coming out of a pandemic, I can't even imagine, children that weren't, what kind of stuff was going on when they were trapped all the time in these situations and nobody to kind of get that break from or to feel safe with. Their brain has been in crisis mode for however long it's been going on. And then they didn't even get those little minor breaks that they might have gotten in school sometimes.
We recently had a conversation here about that, and you are so right. Because I don't know if you're experiencing that, but I think everyone in the helping fields are seeing that sharp rise in the number of people that are seeking services or experiencing things like that. Angela, what are your thoughts on, and again, different age groups? Do we see a consistency in those signs and symptoms of the effects of domestic violence and other forms of violence on kids? Or do you see differences from preschool to school age to adolescent teens?
There definitely is differences in those age groups. The younger kids don't have the cognitive skills to figure things out.
Right.
So what you often see, so you're talking preschool, even your toddlers and stuff, you will a lot of see what we call regressive behavior. So if they were already previously toilet trained, you may see them having more accidents or problems with that. You may see some thumb sucking or some self-soothing kind of behaviors that were more like you saw when they were like infants or young toddlers. Come back. You'll see a lot of restlessness. You may see kids be more withdrawn, jumpier, be more clingy. The younger ones. Now, when you get into the school age kids, you may see some kids feeling guilty, possibly. You may see them kind of blame themselves for the abuse. Oh, if I would have behaved a little better, or if I just keep daddy or whoever the perpetrator might be, in this scenario happy, then they won't hurt mommy, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they take on that. And that's a lot of times where you see that caregiving role step in. We use a term called parentified. The children almost take on a parent role. They may even take on a role to protect younger siblings. And I've seen it even in children as young as like 5 and 6 years old, taking care of their little toddler infant siblings, and feeling responsible for their safety and their well-being and, almost prompting moms, and it doesn't even mean that the mom is neglecting the other child. It's just that child feels they need to help however they can.
Yes.
You may see them have restlessness, not be able to sit still. You mentioned not being able to concentrate. Many of these children get misdiagnosed with things like ADHD, or behavior issues, even to the point of getting diagnosed with learning disabilities. You may hear people say things like, oh, that child has so much learning potential, meaning I understand, that I recognize that they're intelligent enough to learn these things. Well, they're not capable of. Our brains are designed to not let us access that part of our brain, the part that helps us learn, the part that helps us make decisions, the part that controls our impulses when we feel we are in danger. If you feel like you're in danger every second of every day, then you're never going to be able to access that because you're more worried about, is mommy okay? I'm not there.
Right.
Or is, my big sister okay, or my aunt, or whoever their caregiver is that they're worried about, and, oh, I wonder if they're, I'm going to get, upset daddy or upset Uncle John or whoever it is that's coming home when I get home. Well, who can concentrate if that's what you're thinking about, And so, little by little, schools are being trained in trauma-informed practices so that they can learn to recognize that and not necessarily jump to conclusions and try to figure out how they can help those things, which is phenomenal. And it's really great to see, especially in our area, the schools making that effort in an outstanding way.
It is. It's exciting stuff because I know through the years moving into that trauma informed and understanding, just to understand why things happen the way they do when somebody has experienced trauma or multiple layers of it, it really does give the helper or the teacher or whoever better tools to use. And once you understand, you are more patient with those folks. You want, you want to help.
Yeah,
but
you see that with the adolescents too. They have a lot of those. They tend to have a little bit more acting out behaviors or isolative. You may see them skipping school between that, like elementary age, middle school. You'll start seeing grades decline. You may see them even having like more acting out behaviors such as drug use, unprotected sex. You may actually see them take on some of that violence. I think it's like boys who have been exposed to some kind of abuse are 10 times greater risk of being violent and aggressive themselves towards others. You may see children act that out in their play. Girls more likely to then be victims of sexual abuse or, date rape type situations and things like that because they're just looking for connections. Relationships are so important in the development of children. We're the only species that relies on human relationships to survive. If you think of puppies when they're born, they can crawl over and nurse on the mother. Horses, giraffes, elephants, they all stand up instantly to survive. Babies are the only ones that have to be taken and fed and so it's that relationship. And so it's, when those relationships don't seem right and aren't right, it's going to create a lot of problems for an individual.
Angela, I wanted to also ask you, how can we help support children who are traumatized and help get them started through their journey of healing?
So, first of all, of course, it's important to have them have some kind of safe environment. So giving them some sense of safety, even if they're not coming out of the home that is critical or, is crisis for them. Making sure they have some safe haven. Helping them to talk about their fears. And you don't have to be a professional to let a child talk about what they're afraid of. Reassuring them, telling them it's not their fault, helping them understand that this is not healthy, that those are not healthy relationships, but that healthy relationships are possible and they're out there. How to set boundaries, how to say no, how to say stop. All those things that can help them, helping them work through things, even just making sure that, giving them some normalcy, some normal fun events, normal fun moments of normal childhood, helping them not be parents in the household, and helping them literally be kids so that they're not so fearful and telling them they're safe, that they're cared for, that they're loved. Those are all important things. And I understand that sometimes the victims themselves don't have the capacity because they're in a traumatic experience also. Right. So that's where teachers, grandparents, friends, family members, neighbors, police officers, anyone that can help them feel safe out there, that can be a positive influence where that child makes a huge difference and makes the difference in that child having some of those adverse effects or not in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I've learned a lot today from you, I'm telling you. So I hope certainly that anybody watching this, listening to this, really gets that wonderful information that you've shared. Is there any other contact information? Is there any other websites that you think people could go to get more information so that they themselves can help the children that are in their lives?
Well, I would tell you that the site that Bruce Perry works for is called the Child Traumatic Stress Network.
Yes.
National Chat. That one has excellent resources. It gives you articles. It can give you guidance. It can check out. I think if anybody even just reaches out to their local community mental health agencies or their local domestic violence shelters, obviously you guys see a lot of that stuff.
Yes.
We do through our various children's programs, prevention programs, mental health therapist programs, all the way up to our more, restrictive settings. I just feel like there's no wrong door. I mean, even if you reach out to pediatricians, doctors, they all have a way to connect you to help. And, I know that not every person feels safe, doesn't feel like they can leave sometimes.
Right.
And so making a safety plan, reaching out, sometimes not telling your children you're making a plan to leave is important too, because children can't keep secrets and it's not fair to them to put that stress on them either.
You are absolutely right.
And so it's just, it's really, the earlier the kids get feeling safe, that they get some consistency in their life, that they can their brains can rest and get out of the crisis mode. That is what is most important. So getting them into services, but it also means the parent or that caregiver getting into services too, so that they're not tense all the time.
Right.
Unfortunately, abusers sometimes use those children as pawns, and to keep that person there, and in custody situation. Unfortunately, they are often able to do that because of the factors, as I'm sure your, organization and many like yours very well know. So
we do, unfortunately. And, I want everyone to know also, if there are, you can contact us at CAPC. CAPC.org is our website. There's access there where you can send a general informational email, and our staff will be glad to hook you up. We have the capabilities anywhere in the world to hook you up to your local victim service center. From there, all victim service centers, or the majority of us, must know all the referral services in our surrounding county. So reach out to your local DV program, sexual assault program. You can get anything you need there to help. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence is also a great site, and the Office of Women's Health. There's great information there. And Dickinson Center and CAPC, again, I can't tell you how long we've all worked together, and we collaborate. And that's what each and every one of you must do. We can't do this alone. It takes a village. And that's Angela's famous quote. It does. It takes a village for us to make change. And Angela, I can't thank you enough. I'd love to have you come back to talk about so many other things. You are wonderful. You care. What you do for people in the community is just astounding. We thank you. I'd like you to come back and talk more about your new project that you're the program director for, because I think that would be just awesome. What you're doing is fantastic.
I'd be happy to. As you said, we work very closely with CAPC, and it's very important that we do that, because we have certain resources, you have certain resources, and it can't be done by one entity. Every community has community mental health access some way, and even with telehealth being a bigger thing, somebody can access help when they need it. They just need to ask someone for it.
Yep, absolutely. Any final thoughts from you, my friend?
I would just say, safety is one of the most important aspects for children, and that people need to be aware of that. When children don't feel safe, they can't do the other things successfully. And children have such capacity to do great things in their lives if they're just given the opportunity and the tools and the support to do so.
Well said. What a great ending. I want to thank everybody for being with us today and sticking around and participating as great viewers and listeners for our Ask the Advocate episode. We're talking today about the effects of domestic violence and sexual violence on children. Angela Chu, my wonderful special guest, thank you again. I want to wish everybody well. And until next time, for Angela and everybody here at CAPC, I'm Bille Jo Wyant. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ask the Advocate. If you have a topic suggestion or would like to be a guest on the podcast, you can contact me directly at asktheadvocatepodcast@gmail.com.